I've been doing this for years, watching people show up to our first call, convinced that they know exactly what they want. Watching them 6 months later, married to somebody who checked exactly zero of the boxes that they swore were non-negotiable. I've had clients show up with lists that sound like a parts order, like they're building a person from scratch. One guy told me he'd only date women under 30, blonde only, no kids, had to love hiking. He's now married to a lovely brunette painter, never hiked a day in her life. He and her 3 kids bought her hiking boots for her 40th birthday. I worked with a woman who rejected 4 perfectly fantastic men because they weren't over 6'2", only to show up at her wedding a couple years later and meet the groom who was shorter than her mother. After matching way more than 500 singles, I've learned some things. Things that surprised me. Things that'll probably annoy you. Things that explain why some people find love in 3 months and other people are still single 3 years later wondering what they're doing wrong. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain and sharing what I've actually learned from watching hundreds of people either find love or spectacularly fail at it. If that sounds at all interesting, I hope you'll stick around because that's what's on the agenda. Here's something I noticed pretty early on. People who show up with the longest list of requirements, they're the ones I'm still trying to match 3 years later. Someone once told me that she needed a man who made over 300K, owned his own home, and had a graduate degree. She wanted to make sure that he spoke at least 2 languages. Oh, and that she also wanted to make sure that he could cook. It would be great if he also played an instrument. Oh, and that he worked out 5 days a week. She, by the way, didn't. I was thinking, are we looking for a partner or creating a job posting that nobody in their right mind would apply for? Meanwhile, the woman who showed up and said, I just want somebody who's really kind and has a great energy. She was engaged 4 months later. Because here's what a long list actually signals to me. I'm terrified of making the wrong choice, so I'm going to create so many requirements and obstacles that nobody can possibly meet them all. And then when it doesn't work out, I have an excuse other than the fact that I'm feeling scared. The longer your list, the smaller your pool. And eventually your pool is so small, you're basically standing in a puddle by yourself wondering why there are no fish. This one broke my heart a little bit when I first figured it out. Somebody would show up and tell me exactly what they wanted. Confident, successful, emotionally available, and a really great communicator. Somebody who was ready for a commitment. All very reasonable, mature adult desires, right? So I'd match them with somebody who was all of those things, had a stable career, owns their own place, great relationship with their family, even been to therapy, ready to really build something real. So perfect. And then they go on the date and come back with, yeah, I don't know, there just wasn't really a spark. And then I've matched people who had different backgrounds and interests, but when they meet, it is just chemistry. It was instant chemistry, easy conversation. They're finishing each other's sentences, and the date lasts for hours until they're closing the place down and heading somewhere else to close that down. You can't predict chemistry. Back in the 70s, I used to be a checker. That's what they called cashiers at Dominic's. It was a grocery store in the Chicago area, and there were no scanners back then in the day. My favorite thing was working the express lanes, 10 items or less, because my goal was to have every price punched into my cash register before the items even made it into my hands. Then I could just scoop them all at once and slide them straight to the bagger without flipping anything upside down to even look for a sticker with a price. You can't do that anymore with scanners. Anyway, if you enjoy pushing buttons half as much as I did, I've got 2 you might really like. One is becoming a channel member. The other is hitting the subscribe button. As long as you're down there poking around, you might as well go pro. You can't logic your way into attraction, and you can't force connection by checking enough compatibility boxes on a spreadsheet. Which is why I always tell people, stop trying to find somebody who's perfect on paper and go meet actual humans in actual rooms and see what actually happens. Because paper tells you nothing about whether you're going to like the sound of somebody's laugh or their energy makes you feel alive, or whether sitting next to them feels easy or like work that you didn't sign up for. Nothing like doing it in the wild and just seeing what happens. You know what actually predicts whether a relationship lasts? Not attraction, not compatibility scores or shared hobbies or matching Myers-Briggs types, but whether somebody can hear feedback without losing their mind. Can they listen when you say, hey, you know what, when you do that thing, it kind of makes me feel like this? Can they take that in without getting all defensive about it, without making you the problem or turning it into a 3-hour argument about what you did wrong and how they're actually the victim here instead? Because if somebody can't handle feedback when they're still trying to impress you, they're definitely not going to be able to handle it later on when, life gets harder. The people who stay together, they can hear that truth. Oh, you hurt my feelings. And then they'll just say, oh, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. I'll work on it. And then they actually work on it. The people who can't do that, they turn every piece of feedback into a war. And eventually you stop bringing things up because it's just not worth the fight. And then you're both just quietly resenting each other until somebody finally leaves. So if you want to know if somebody's a good long-term bet, watch how they handle the first time you tell them something they did bothered you or hurt your feelings. That moment's going to tell you a lot about your future. This sounds backwards, but stay with me here. There are people who say that they're open to anything. I don't have a type really, they say. I don't really have a lot of preferences. No requirements. Just going with the flow here, letting the universe decide, very, evolved. They end up dating everyone and connecting with nobody because being open to everything means that you're not actually choosing anything. You're just accepting whatever shows up. And when you don't choose, you end up with whatever's left after everyone else has made their choices. The people who find great partners, they know what they want. Not a superficial list, but a clear sense of the kind of person that they're looking for and the kind of life that they want to build with that person. And then they choose intentionally. They don't just date whoever expresses interest in them. They decide who actually gets their time. Being open sounds nice and really flexible, but it's actually just avoiding making a decision. And if you never decide, then you just never get anywhere. You just float around forever wondering why nothing's sticking. Most people have some type of baggage. Most people have had some type of hurt and have exes and maybe regrets or lessons that, you've learned the hard way. That's not the problem. That's just being human. And some people don't have baggage. But the problem is that when you're so busy protecting yourself from getting hurt again that you can't let anybody in, when you're so armored up that nobody can get close enough to actually know you. I've worked with people who've been through devastating divorces and betrayals that would break most people. And they did the work. They processed it and healed and made new friendships and came back ready to date. And I've worked with people who had one bad breakup and, 28 years ago, and they're still treating every new person like they're the ex who hurt them. Still testing and prodding and waiting for some proof to come. Still building walls. Your baggage isn't the issue. Making every new person audition to prove that they're different from whoever hurt you, that's an issue. The goal isn't to have no past. The goal is to have processed it enough that you can not make every new person pay for crimes they didn't commit. I could tell pretty quickly whether somebody's going to find a relationship in 3 months or so, or still be looking 3 years from now. The ones who find somebody fast, they're willing to have the harder conversations and early on. They're not afraid of the answers. What are you looking for? Are we on the same page? Is this going somewhere? They're not afraid to ask because they're not afraid to hear an answer that they don't like. And if the answer is, I'm not really ready or I'm not feeling it or whatever, they're pretty good at just moving on. The ones who take 3 years, they try to avoid those conversations. They hint at it and they hope, they wait, and they convince themselves that if they're just patient enough, the person will eventually want what they want them. And 3 years later, they're in the same ambiguous situation with the same person who still doesn't really want the same kind of commitment. And they're somehow shocked about that, even though the person told them at the beginning, either with words or actions, that they just didn't want to hear. One conversation, that's the difference. The willingness to ask the question and accept the answer instead of spending years trying to change it. This is my favorite because I see it every single day. I'll tell somebody, You keep choosing people who are emotionally unavailable, and then you're hurt when they're unavailable. And they'll say, yeah, but this person is different. I can tell. No, they're not. Or I'll say, you know what? You keep dating people who aren't ready for commitment and hoping that they're going to change. And they'll say, I know that didn't work before, but this time really feels different to me. Everyone thinks that they're the exception. Everyone thinks their situation is special, different, unique. And then they end up exactly where the pattern said they would. Heartbroken or confused, wondering how this happened again, alone. The people who break the pattern, they stop thinking that they're so special. They look at their history and then they go, oh, I keep doing the same thing. Maybe I should try something different. Yes, that's it. That's the whole secret. Stop thinking you're the exception to the rule and pay attention to the pattern and then do something else. So there you have it. 10 things I've learned from matching way, way more than 500 singles. 500 was a fun number, but it's been thousands. Some of them probably stung, right? Some of them might have annoyed you. Good. That means that you probably needed to hear that. But if you take even one of these and actually apply it, you're going to save yourself years maybe. And that's worth a little discomfort, don't you think? All right, I hope you found it interesting. If you did, you might want to check out this other episode here about who a matchmaker would never date. Oh, yeah, and hey, before you go, please give my little mama here the thumbs up she's requesting. Last week, she asked me if the internet knows I'm her daughter yet. Like it's a person that she needs to formally introduce me to. Ah, don't forget to subscribe before you leave, because understanding patterns is how we stop repeating them. I appreciate you being here today, and until next time, have a good one.